Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Random Redshirt podcast. I am one of the hosts, Zach, and the other host is Chris. Long time no see, buddy. What's up?
Long time no see. Hello, my dear friend Zach. I hope you are doing well. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. It's great to be with you again and spend time with you again, my friend. It has been a long time. You've been busy. I've been busy, and things just keep getting like busier and busier and crazier and crazier. And so I'm looking forward to the time uh, when we don't have as much on our plate and we can just relax.
Yeah, a little
Yeah,
mental decompression, I would say, right?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Mental
Yeah.
decompression is nice.
I've been busy, but not, it pales in comparison to your schedule, my friend. Your travel would wear out even the strongest of human beings. So the
Oh,
fact that
yeah.
you're still here is telling.
Thank you.
You are a
Thank you.
modern day Tony Stark, my friend, minus the private jet and lots of money.
Indeed. Indeed. We need a private jet. Yeah, that would be nice.
That we could paint it red and call it the Random Redshirt Podcast Jet.
There we go.
That'd be kind of
Yeah,
fun.
it'd be nice.
Anybody
There we
anybody
go.
have a private jet that they willing to donate? We'll be
To
happy
donate to
to.
us.
We'd be
Yeah.
happy. Well, not even just the jet. You'd have to pay for the maintenance and the fuel and the place to park it. So the jet would be the cheapest part of it, I think.
hmm Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we'll somehow do a tax write-off of it if yeah,
Um, I don't know what form
somehow.
that is, so I'm gonna need your help with that one. Oh, anyways, yes. So, well, welcome everybody back to the podcast. We appreciate you joining us as always and listening or watching us all over the globe in the interwebs. I know our release schedule of episodes has been a little bit kind of here and there lately, but like as Chris said, we've both been busy, and Chris is traveling like crazy, and I'm working, and thank God I'm back to my day job. I'm not
Yeah.
on all those weird hours all the time, which is great. It's good for my sleep. It's good for my mentals.
Hmm.
But yeah, we've been a little bit hit or miss lately. This month's been a little crazy, and hopefully over the next couple months we'll kind of get back to a little bit more of a regular uh, recording and release schedule. And we are working our way through our. I don't even know if I can call it a new Spotlight series yet, but our current Spotlight series, which is Starfleet's finest with a question mark. And the first few episodes of this have been great, getting a chance to look at some of the different admirals and captains across Star Trek and determine, are they really Starfleet's finest or not? And we're going to see a lot of that throughout the series. We saw that with Admiral Pressman. I think he's probably part of that question mark of
Yeah.
whether Starfleet's finest or not.
Yeah, we had a great discussion and after discussion regarding Admiral Pressman, right? And so um earlier today, and that was just it was interesting because Admiral Pressman, he is a charismatic individual. Like he's very friendly. He
Yeah.
wants to make friends with people. But like under beneath all of that too, we also feel like he is a narcissist and he wants to do what he wants to do and he doesn't want anyone to stand in his
Yeah.
way. And he's very much about like, hey, I'm above everything. I've got friends in high places, and you are lucky and you're privileged if you know me, right? So,
Well put.
yeah.
That is absolutely true. Now, we're not going to get into it, obviously, but I do think it's important that we note at the time of this recording, uh, the first three episodes of Starfleet Academy are out, and just from what I have read online, uh, it's very, very, very controversial. In fact, it might be the most controversial Star Trek series, at least in its initial phase of any of them. Maybe outside of when TNG first came out, because there was a lot of controversy with that because all the Trekkies were just, it was only the original series. What's this newfangled new show? It's not Kirk and Spock and McCoy and Scotty and all them. But there's been a huge, huge controversy. The show uh, has gotten bad, bad ratings. Some you can make arguments as to why, but very controversial. If you are have been watching or listening to us long enough, you'll know we're not afraid to talk about controversial shows. Go back and watch our review of Section 31, that movie that is supposedly called Star Trek. But I'm curious. We want to hear from you. If you've watched Starfleet Academy, whether you like it or dislike it, please let us know either in the comments below or send us a message on one of our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, or you can message us I guess through, you can probably do it through YouTube as well, but also on our email, the random redshirt podcast at gmail.com. You can do that as well. Be very curious to hear your thoughts. The one thing I will say, I watched the pilot. I have my thoughts.
Yeah.
Um, but as always, and I think we've both said this before, Chris, that it's okay to have your likes and it's okay to have your dislikes because television shows and movies and entertainment in general is just like food. Everybody has their own taste, right? So if you love Starfleet Academy, hey, that's awesome. If you don't like it, that's great too. Everybody likes their shows. I mean, we all know that the greatest Star Trek series of all time is Deep Space Nine, and that's the only correct answer. But besides that, everybody's allowed to have their taste, right, Chris?
That's absolutely. I know Ken has watched it as well, so would love to hear his thoughts. Like, that'd be really great since both of you have seen it, since
Well, I've only seen the
what you
first
guys think.
episode. He's
First
watched the
episode,
first three.
first three. So he's
Yeah.
watched 300% or 200% more than you have.
That
So,
is
right?
correct.
Yeah,
Yes, I
yeah.
won't do that in math in public, especially when we're recording on Zoom. That's just not going to go over well for me. So, or our audience having to try to hear me math in public.
Uh,
But that's why I was a communications major. I didn't do math.
it's good that they're trying new things and maybe different things. I like that they're branching out into these kind different kind of niche aspects of Star Trek. Now, I think both you and I are very discerning and very particular on like what we like. We like things crafted like well and in a
Yeah.
fine manner, right? So I have to recognize that it's really good that they're looking for these other kind of avenues of which to explore the universe of Star Trek and kind of bring those together. They also have to be crafted in a fine way,
Yeah. Oh, they
yeah.
branched on this show. They branched. But anyways, I just thought it's important we kind of recognize
Uh,
that the latest Star Trek iteration that's out right now is Starfleet Academy. Um, and yeah, I don't know that we'll review the show on the podcast, but we're certainly curious to hear your thoughts out there and your opinions on the show if you have watched it. Be curious to hear that. So, okay, let's jump into this, Chris. The latest episode in our Spotlight series, Starfleet's Finest. It comes from none other than TNG, as again. And this is the season 4, episode 21, The Drumhead,
mhm.
written by Jerry Taylor, rest in peace. And we're thankful that you and I both got a chance to meet her years ago at the Star Trek convention. I think it was 2021, if
Yeah,
memory serves me correctly, that we got to meet her. And once again, another great episode directed by none other than Jonathan Frakes.
yeah, absolutely. You know is what came to my mind just now on this episode when I replay it in my mind is that it feels like it could be a very intimate stage play that's
That's,
just
yeah,
played out in front of you. There's not spectacle in this particular episode,
right.
but there is very much this feeling of intimacy with the characters. You feel like literally you feel like you're up like right close and next to them.
Yeah.
There's not this there's not like overarching or bombastic like background music either that I noticed in this episode. Um did feel like this kind of fit the format of a very interesting stage play, very intimate.
That's a good point. Did this give you any vibes or any feelings, a little bit of like the episode Court Martial from TOS, which we also talked about? Kind of similar feeling, I feel like, right? I mean, it wasn't a court martial. It was supposed to be an
Mhm.
investigation, and we'll get into that later. But it kind of had a little bit of that feel based on the room that they set up and the tables and the chairs and the person up in the middle. Uh, I felt a very similar feeling to what I felt in court martial.
Yeah, a little
Different
bit.
circumstances, obviously, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah, a little bit of a different feeling. Yep. Yep. But
yeah.
of course, court martial with it being with Captain Kirk in there, you had a little bit of side romance, which was necessary.
I mean, of course, right? I mean, that's a given, right? Even when Kirk's career's in the line, he still finds time for the ladies, right? So, even especially past loved ones and everything.
That's right.
Uh, so this episode is interesting. The title especially, because the title actually comes from a actual meaning, a drumhead court martial that's in the dictionary.
Mhm. Yeah, that's right. And like a court, it's from a court martial usually held on the battlefield, and Captain Picard describes this in the episode a little bit, which was great. But it is usually held on the battlefield, this court martial, for the summary immediate trial of charges and offenses to someone that has committed these during military operations. So it is very swift. And as Captain Picard said, there's usually no opportunity for appeal. And then the punishment is typically very severe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the actual name drumhead is used because in the battlefield, like in the Civil War and so forth, they would actually turn drumheads over and use them as like the presiding officer, the person who was the judge to sit there and receive the court martial. So I found that interesting. I did not know that. I mean, I know the lines in there, but it had been quite a while since I'd seen this episode. And I guess maybe when I had watched that in the past, I didn't make the connections. I don't know why, but I didn't. And so going back and seeing this again now and being able to relate it to an actual thing that happened in U.S. history and world history too, because I think the British did it too,
Yes.
from what I saw, is really cool. Honestly, that they took the name of something like that from history and use it not only as a title but as kind of like the setting for this episode.
And that concept is wonderful that they bring it in. I think Captain Picard, if my memory serves me right in this episode, brings in the concept of how far we've come. Like he brings up the witch trials that have been
Hmm.
there. He brings up um, the drumhead trials that have been there, and he brings up what he's dealing with, the circumstance, with the false trial or this inquisition, as you would have it. But
Yeah,
this idea of like witch trials, drumhead trials, inquisitions throughout history is an important one because not only are we seeing it portrayed in TNG here, like saying no matter how advanced you are or civilized you think you are, like as a federation or as a country or as a society, it's so easy to slip back uh, and submit to like our basest fears.
yeah,
There's yeah, yeah,
that's true.
yeah.
Very good point. So, okay, the episode actually starts out with a captain's log by Captain Picard, which is not uncommon, obviously, and especially in
Yeah,
TNG, right?
yeah.
And it's interesting because this episode and the captain's log starts with Picard talking about having a Klingon exobiologist exchange officer on board for a number of weeks as part of this science exchange program. But right away, we are told that this Klingon is being suspected of a security breach and possibly sabotaging the warp drive.
Yeah. And it opens up with, I think he's being interviewed by Commander Riker and by Counselor Troy, right? Asking questions like, what did you have to do with this, with the warp drive, or do you have any involvement with this shady activities?
Yeah.
Um, and I think this is actually important that he's a Klingon and that Counselor Troy is part of this investigation, because you see there's a duality where Admiral Satie has a Betazoid that is part of like her investigative team, right? And she and Captain Picard actually they debate about that. So um, this this is important because it is a Klingon suspect, and he pushes some buttons with regard to Worf, like shortly thereafter.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I didn't in the beginning, and that is that our focus for this episode, the focus character, is none other than retired Admiral Norah Satie,
Yeah.
who is brought out of retirement in order to help assist with this investigation. And she was the one that exposed the alien conspiracy against Starfleet Command 3 years ago at the time of this episode. And so it's interesting that they're bringing an admiral out of retirement to do this investigation. I guess that kind of makes sense, right? Because you're talking about the flagship of the Federation, and there's been a potential sabotage on board.
Hmm.
So that's not that's not a tiny thing, right? I mean, that's a big deal. The flagship of the Enterprise, or the flagship of the
Hmm.
Federation has potentially been sabotaged. That you talk about huge security breach, huge security ramifications across Starfleet and across the Federation. So I guess it does make sense that they would bring her out for this.
Yeah. And she's coming off I guess you could call it a big victory from her 3 years ago prior
Hmm.
on kind of discovering that conspiracy in Starfleet, like at the highest level. So she has an excellent track record
Yeah.
on her ability to kind of discover and do things. Um, Her coming onto the Enterprise, eh, you have to think that individuals like Captain Picard and individuals like Worf, even though they don't so much, I think, display this in the episode, but maybe some of their pride has to be like hurt a little bit because,
Mm.
security on the ship is ultimately Worf's responsibility and the captain's like responsibility. So if that were to happen, like right underneath their noses and under their command, then you have to think that, oh, some of their pride has to be at stake as well.
Right. Especially because, Picard probably doesn't know exactly how this is all going to play out, right? He doesn't know whether he's going to have to step aside and just let this thing happen and let, retired Admiral Satie come on board and do an investigation like you would have an inspector general do an investigation, or what, right? And like you said, Worf is probably thinking, got to think to himself a little bit, oh, they don't trust me to handle this investigation, so they have to bring an outside source to do it. And it's
Mhm.
also important we note that Admiral Satie is also bringing aboard herself a Betazoid,
Yes.
and which complicates things throughout this entire episode and through the proceedings.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. The initial meetings and greetings between Admiral Satie and Captain Picard and Commander Riker, and even Worf go really well. They're done, you know, they're done well. She's very gracious with Captain Picard, and then when she meets Worf, they have a very, very good like interaction. I think Worf comes into the scene with her, and Worf's discovered something. He's discovered that, hey, possibly um, the other Klingon lieutenant, the exobiologist, was able to smuggle um, the plans from the Enterprise like through his bloodstream, like with this
Yeah, through
device,
this like
right?
hypo syringe thing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And she's impressed with his ability to kind of discover that, and she compliments him. And I think Worf takes that very well, and it puts. I think Worf really admires her for being able to see what he did, and so he's. I think this is important because later on in the episode, Worf really takes to what she is saying and kind of enforces her investigation later in the episode.
Yeah, and also her like, I don't know if he's the like her right hand guy or
Hmm.
whatever, or if he's like her main assistant or top assistant, because she brings two people with her. But the Betazoid is a Sabin, or how do you say his name?
Yeah. So
Him and Worf also really kind of click too, right? And there's even a line in the episode where Sabin says something to the effect of, "Well, I'd like to continue working with Mr. Worf here because him and I seem to be really working together well and everything." And it's almost like they're kind of stroking their egos a little bit, like kind of building
yeah,
Picard and Worf's egos up a little bit. I don't know if they were doing that intentionally with ulterior motives at that particular moment, or what it was. But it is very evident that both retired Admiral Satie and her Betazoid assistant both are very impressed with Picard and Worf and their abilities to assist in this investigation.
Yeah. And to contrast that, like you're right, because it's evident that they are complimenting them highly here, right? Complimenting both Worf and then Satie actually compliments the captain in a way saying, "Hey, I was really skeptical about you being assigned and us working together, but now I see that no, it's really a good thing that we're working together."
Yeah, because in the
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
beginning, she says something about like she looks forward to being like his partner in this
Hmm.
investigation, right? And she's talking about how, I'm not here to blah blah blah, whatever she says. We're going to be partners in this whole thing and so forth. So it sets kind of the precedence. It kind of sets the stage for what we're going to see moving forward, sort of.
Yeah, yeah. But there's a complete 180 degrees different, like later on and towards the end of the episode, because there are very hurtful, like insults to both Worf and to Captain Picard. To Worf in
Yeah.
particular, right? Because I think it was the Beto Saban that points out, "Hey, Worf, how do you feel about your father being a conspirator with the Romulans?" He says something to that
Yeah.
effect, right?
Yeah. That's right. Yep.
And Worf stands up and he's like furious. He's like, "Wow, this is like terrible." And then it was either Satie or Sabin that says, uh, um, really hurts Picard. Like, "Hey, like, how were you have you healed from your encounter with the Borg? How did you feel when you found out that Romulan ambassador you were delivering a Romulan spy back uh back to the Romulans and that wasn't an
Yeah.
ambassador?"
They were transporting one, right? I think
Hmm.
on the Enterprise. I'm glad you mentioned that. And that's a really good point because when they were doing that, it felt to me like they were attempting to maybe guilt them into becoming sympathizers with them, right? Like
Yeah.
they were trying to make sure that Picard and Worf thought, "Oh, I have these things in my past that are kind of maybe not questionable, right? But maybe bring them a little bit of shame or a little bit of guilt." And because of that, they want them to do something to kind of make up for it, right? In this case, I think we do get to a point later in the episode where Admiral Satie is literally just looking for some kind of justice. It doesn't even matter who it is; they're looking for basically a scapegoat, right? I mean, I would think Simon Tarsus is the scapegoat in this case,
Yeah.
and she doesn't necessarily seem interested in whether he's actually guilty or not. She seems interested in the fact that, well, because we learn he's half Romulan, he lied on his entrance paperwork to Starfleet, that he's automatically guilty by association.
Yeah.
And so, and I know we'll get into more of that, but I'm really glad you brought that up because I think that's key. That it's almost like they're trying to get Picard and Worf on their side because, like, I think Satie just wants a swift proceeding, swift justice, and everything else, so they can get on with it. And that's why it makes sense. This episode's called the Drumhead.
Yeah, exactly. When we think about Satie and how she is introduced as a character into this episode, like from the very first time she's transported onto the transporter room and her meetings with Picard, her meetings with Worf, everyone has a great deal of high esteem towards her, right? They think,
Mm-hmm.
um, they they know, at least Captain Picard knows who her father is. She's got all this history of discovering that prior conspiracy in Starfleet. So so she is well known. She's got great esteem, great respect from everyone that's around her. And then as I think about her more, um, she is entering the situation with a great deal of self pride. She's very prideful, like as a person, because she makes it a point to be like, yeah, I typically work alone, then
Mm,
because when I work alone, if something goes wrong, then I don't have to look very far to see like where it might have gone wrong.
yeah.
So I think that is um, is something important about her character. And I forget the name of the actress, but I think she plays it really well. It's not like a arrogant or boastful type of pride that's like out there, but I think it's held like very well in how she interacts with everybody.
Yeah. Well, I think like we discussed earlier today that her father her father was very well known. And
Hmm.
Picard even quotes her father later in the episode. And then, they have meetings in his ready room and in her quarters talking about the situation and so forth. And I think the esteem Picard has, in fact, doesn't Picard even says that her dad was a required reading at the academy.
Yes.
So he holds a massive amount of gravitas
Yes.
within the Federation, within Starfleet, right? And so I wonder if and the way the character was designed and shaped and developed and the way it was played by the actress, I wonder if that was done that way, almost like Norah Satie, and she talks about like, the questions her father would pose at the dinner table,
Hmm.
and her brothers and her would have to debate it, and she would always win, and so forth. And I wonder if it was done that way because she felt almost like she was overshadowed by her father, like she was living in his shadow because of he was, a little bit larger than life. And it's that she had to go out and do these things to prove herself, to get out of her father's shadow and become her own person and not just be known as the daughter of, you know, her dad, her dad's daughter and so forth. I'm trying to remember the
Yeah.
her dad's first name, Judge Satie. I don't remember if it what his first name was, if it was mentioned or not. But did you feel any of that? Like she was trying to kind of escape some of that and try to prove herself?
Yeah. I and I also feel like maybe there's this immense for her for her entire life, this immense pressure on her, right?
Yeah,
Because she's got this it's obvious that she's loved and really cared for her father. But you've got this immense figure like of a father. You've got her being very successful in her career as admiral and having these really great victories too. But the pressure of living up to not only her father but continuing like this name, because Satie is obviously like a very established name in Starfleet, and then everybody, if it was required reading by everyone in Starfleet, meaning everybody would know who her father is and then know like who she is, right? So
yeah,
there's got to be this enormous amount of pressure on her the whole time. And then this particular circumstance, Starfleet bringing her out of retirement to say, "Hey, come out of retirement, help us. Something's going on here." Then she's got to think, "Oh my goodness, okay, then I've got to prove, right, prove myself again, like in this circumstance." Um, and then I think it obviously has an effect to keep driving her to look for something to say, even though there was nothing there, like after they found uh, the Klingon and what he did, but even though there was nothing there in terms of the warp core explosion, um, her to keep drilling in, and there was nothing there in terms of poor enlisted medical technician. I'm
yeah.
trying to
Simon Tarsius.
Simon Tarsi's, you know, it wasn't enough because she's Admiral Satie and she
Yeah,
has to find something, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I guess that's a good point. Her being under pressure, right?
Yeah.
Like if she walks away and goes, "Well, the Klingon acted alone. We just couldn't. I couldn't find anything." I mean, that's a huge mark. Like you were literally brought out of retirement to tell us that there was a Klingon that was stealing information. But how does that explain the warp core? I don't know. I
Yeah.
couldn't figure it out. She can't do that. That would be a huge letdown, I think, from her
Yeah.
part, right? So that's a good point. Um, so yeah, it's interesting because Worf finds this hypo syringe, which apparently was modified, and it was done in a way in which to, I guess, somehow this is the sci-fi part of it, like
Hmm.
transport information in his bloodstream. and his cover was that, oh, well, I have this syndrome which I have to get weekly injections. And Simon Tarses was one of the medical technicians who would deliver the injections,
Yeah.
right? So there was this, oh, well, they see each other, so they've got to be working together, right? Because clearly, at least in the eyes of Satie, she's not satisfied that Jadon, the Klingon exchange officer, couldn't have been doing this alone. So there has to be a co-conspirator, right? There has to be somebody else besides that. I thought, okay, maybe this is really out of left field.
Hmm.
So when she's saying, oh, well, Jadon couldn't have done it alone, there had to be somebody else. I thought to myself, it kind of reminded me a little bit of the situation with John Wilkes Booth and President Lincoln. You know,
Hmm.
they were looking for the co-conspirators, the folks that helped him, because he couldn't have just done it all by himself. It was too big. There's too much going on, right? So there had to have been other people, and they went on this hunt to find the co-conspirators that helped or helped Booth assassinate Lincoln. In a similar situation here, even though there's no assassination, Satie is kind of going, hey, there's no way on a Federation flagship that he could have done this all by himself. So there has to be somebody else. And this is where I think the beginning of the what I would call like the witch hunt for Satie begins.
Yeah, that's a great point. Um, and that's part of using that tactic of um, fear, and
Yeah.
then that spreads out because Worf takes that idea and then he immediately sets into action and and wants to investigate like on on a very very high level, right?
Mhm.
So, um, but yeah, you back up a little bit too. Captain Picard is also he's not immune to it. Like when she's suggesting these ideas, at first he's also like, yeah, maybe you're right. It's it's kind of improbable that he could have done it himself, but not impossible. You know, maybe you're right. We need to investigate some more because this is all like concerning. Like so,
Mhm.
he wasn't immune to it either. You know, she's suggesting it, and he's thinking, yeah, we really should like get to the bottom of things and figure out what's going on. Because he's got some concern, like too. And so, I think that's an important point to see that even like Captain Picard is not just saying, "Hey, it's all nonsense." You know, he's going, "Okay, yeah, we should see."
Yeah. Okay. I was gonna ask you this question towards the end, but I'll ask it now while it's on my mind, because otherwise I'll
Yeah,
forget.
no, it's so good.
Okay. So in this episode, we see two different attempts, not even attempts, two different situations where betazoids are using their telepathy to read the minds of those that are being questioned as part of the proceedings and the investigation.
Hmm.
Do you think that by doing that, there is any sort of breach of personal property is not the right word, but personal space, you
Just
know, do,
yeah,
do,
it's
do you
like an
do you think that it's a
invasion. Yeah,
yeah personal yeah an invasion of privacy? There we go. That's what I'm looking
yeah.
for. Wow, an invasion of privacy, or do you think in this case, because of the nature of the events, that it's actually warranted and is necessary to get to the bottom of what happened?
Mm-hmm. This is a boy. This is a great point and a great question. I do think that it is uh, an invasion like of personal privacy. Like I think you are when you introduce someone like that, like a Betazoid who has a special power that you do not have, like a human does not have as an individual, right? Then there's immediately like this this unequalness of power. Like I've got this, I can read your mind essentially. I can read your emotions. Um, and so when that is not used ethically, um, then it's going to create like huge problems. And that is what happened here. And in this episode, it was great that not only you see Saban as a Betazoid and he's in the trial, right? But then you see uh, Deanna like earlier in the episode, like in the questioning with with the Klingon lieutenant.
Yeah, with
And
Jadon, yeah.
Deanna says like, yeah, it's hard to tell, but he's really closed, so she's contributing in that investigation. Saban is contributing in that investigation. And then you have the debate between Picard and Satie about the use of the betazoids. And so Picard questions her, saying, "Hey, I don't know that it's right that Saban is there." And then she points out kind of his hypocrisy because she goes, "Well, don't you, your counselor is Betazoid too. Don't you use her?" And he's like, "Well, no, but I don't use her like in a trial, right?" And she goes, "Well, don't you act like if she's got a recommendation, don't you act on it?" And he
Yeah.
pauses. He goes, "Oh, yeah, I guess I do."
Yeah,
And
she's right.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
she's right. She
yeah,
makes a great point. Yeah.
yeah, she does. And then he kind of backs away and he goes, "Yeah, maybe I should rethink that."
Yeah.
And wasn't it like I see that it was perfect that they have this in that episode that Saban is there and that Deanna is there and they both they're both in the they both kind of do the same things.
Yeah.
Like um so I absolutely think it's unethical, because I think that power it's too much power for the circumstance, and
Mhm.
it can be um, uh, twisted in a way that you don't want it to go. Yeah.
Okay. That's an excellent answer. I think you're right. I know that there are times, and even after this, right?
Yeah.
Picard clearly doesn't stop using Deanna for this because there's
Yeah.
many episodes in
Right.
the future where he does, right? So he maybe over time he forgets and decides, we'll just use the Betazoid, right? But I believe there was in here in the U.S. I believe post 9/11 there was something I think it was called the Patriot Act that
Yeah.
was established, and that basically allowed the U.S. government to do surveillance on American citizens uh, in under the guise of national security and Department of Homeland Security. And all. I think if my memory get me correctly, I didn't look this up. It's just off the top of my head. So I look at this kind of similar to how I would look at this Patriot Act thing, right? Where, you know, it could be very easy to overstep your bounds and use it for the reasons that, you know, use it for other reasons besides what it was established for. With the Betazoid power, I feel like there has to be certain circumstances where you would need that to assist, right? So, okay, let's say that like many times, the Enterprise is up against a foe, up against an enemy, and it's do or die, it's life or death. Like this is involving the security and safety of the entire Enterprise and her crew. But Picard needs Deanna to read some alien's mind or try to get some gauge on if the alien's lying or what's going on in order to make the best decision possible under the given circumstances, right? So under the guise of safety and security of the ship and its crew, I feel like that kind of makes sense as to
Yeah.
using that ability. But in this situation, especially with Simon Tarsus, and even with Jadon before he reveals that yes, I did steal this information, but I had nothing to do with the sabotage. But especially with Simon Tarses, I believe that's a huge violation
Yeah.
because, like Picard says, he hasn't been accused. I mean, he hasn't been you know, I guess found guilty of anything.
Yeah.
He's innocent until proven guilty, and so I definitely think it's an invasion of privacy there. So an
Yeah.
invasion, of personal privacy. I guess that's redundant. Um, so I think there are scenarios where it makes sense, and then where it absolutely doesn't make sense. I don't know what your thoughts are on all that.
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't mind, I'm going to pull in another episode and a different
Yeah,
captain in this
yeah,
because I
yeah.
think this
Please
this
do.
flows totally in
Is it
line.
Cisco?
Not Cisco.
Yeah, yeah.
Ronnie Cox, Captain Jellicoe.
Captain
Captain Jellicoe.
Jellicoe. Yeah, yeah.
I
We're
have
gonna
to,
talk about him
yeah,
too
we're
later
gonna
in the
talk.
Spotlight series.
So
Yeah.
Captain Jellicoe comes on the Enterprise, and your point about invasion of privacy, I think, is perfect because so Captain Jellicoe's on the Enterprise, and he's kind of, he's brand new. He's brand new to the flagship, trying to assert his own like style of command, right?
Yeah.
And then Deanna Troy, like in one scene, like she makes a remark to Riker. Riker's like, well, he's someone it's a remark to someone. Someone says, oh yeah, well he sure is confident. And then Deanna Troy says, oh no, he's so unsure of himself. He's like scared. Isn't that?
Oh,
And then she puts that in the universe. She says that out loud for other people to
yeah.
hear. I think, now that I think about like that scene and like what she did there, like because completely hurt like Jellicoe. Because Jellicoe had just come on. He's trying to
Yeah.
do
Because
his
he finds
thing.
out about it, right? That she knows that, doesn't he? I
Uh,
can't remember.
maybe. Yeah, we gotta watch. Yeah, I look forward to
Well,
watching
we'll
that again.
watch it.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. But I'm like, dude, you just wouldn't. Yeah, any new person that comes on the flagship, yeah, he's gonna be nervous, right? He's
Right.
gonna be a little bit unsure. It's first few days on the starship,
You're
and
stepping in for Captain Picard. I mean, that's a
yeah,
big shoes to fill.
yeah, and then you say that, like, oh yeah, he's super unsure of himself. He's not confident at all. Now that I think about that, that's not cool.
That's a great point. And
Yeah.
I don't remember if betazoids have the ability to kind of like block it out and like, you know, turn it on and turn it off. If they don't, then I guess, she would have known that, but that didn't mean she had to share it with anybody. She could have just kept
Hmm?
it to herself.
Yeah. She
But
kept
if
it.
they
Yeah.
but if they do have the ability to turn it on and turn it off, it's like you should have that turned off unless someone asks, if the captain asks you to read, a bad guy or something, you shouldn't be just walking around. I want to say there's a scene between her and her mother, Luoxana, in one of the TNG episodes about that very topic,
Mm.
about reading people versus not reading people and turning it on, turning it off, or something like that. So it's probably out there somewhere. I just don't remember specifically, but
Yeah.
that is a really, really good point you bring up. And it goes exactly back to what we're talking about with this idea of when is it okay and when it isn't, because that's a power that you shouldn't monkey with.
Yeah. And I would think that Tarsus, like walking into the room, like and knowing that, yeah, there's a Betazoid person that's there that's going to be asking me like all these questions. He's
Yeah.
going to be scared, right? So,
Yes. And that makes sense because doesn't Sabin say something that effect, like he's really
mhm.
scared or whatever? And
Yeah.
it's like, well, yeah, duh. He's sitting here and he's being questioned about some sabotage that he claims he knows nothing about. I mean, yeah, you're going to be nervous too. It's like basically it's the equivalent of the Betazoids are the equivalent of having the friggin' whatchamacall polygraph
Hmm.
in the room, right? Like they can read you like a book. Literally, they can read you. So it's like you're getting a polygraph, even though you're like, what am I here for? Am I being accused of a crime? Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it really, there's some very real moral implication and questions that go into this episode and the process by which they're getting after answers under this investigation and these proceedings that are happening on board.
Yeah. Um, there's after Tarsus's first interview, and then they let him go. He almost gets off, I would say, because something I noticed, there's a meeting between Captain Picard and Satie and Satie's staff and Worf, and they're kind of they're just kind of meeting like where do we go from here and what we should do. And everyone's they're not really talking about Tarsus except Worf. Worf brings it up. It's like no one else brings it up, and Worf's like, "Oh well, we should still like investigate him to the end, right?" And, and so I almost feel like, well, we do feel so bad for Tarsus because he's like almost okay, and then Worf just he he had to push that button and goes, "Oh well, let's see where this leads," and then that leads to disaster for Tarsus, right? So,
Yeah, well, especially because so Sabin is the one that senses that there's this fear and this guilt from Tarsus and that he's lying about something. And so it they literally take a betazoid who's reading against his will, reading Tarsus' mind, And just by the feelings that the Betazoid is getting off of him, now they're like, oh, well, we found the co-conspirator because he's hiding something.
Yeah.
But what they haven't said yet is what is being hidden. We learn later it's not actually anything to do with the sabotage. It's to do with the fact that he lied on his paperwork before he came into Starfleet. I guess his Starfleet application, because I think he originally wanted to go to his mother or somebody wanted to go to Starfleet Academy, but he just wanted to get out there, I think, out into
Yeah.
space and go do things, right? And he didn't want to be in a classroom, I think is what he said. Something along those lines. So uh they're already accusing him of something with zero evidence, none whatsoever. And this is where I think, especially for Satie, this is where the witch hunt is beginning to ramp up. And even especially because I think Satie either recommends his movements be restricted or whatever, but
Hmm.
Picard's like, I'm not going to restrict him based on the intuition of your Betazoid, you know, assistant here. Like that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where she gets into the debate with Picard, like on his use of a betazoid. Like, well, you'd do the same thing, wouldn't you, with your counselor?
Yep.
And Picard's like, well, no, I wouldn't. And actually, he's like, oh, okay, yeah, I probably would.
Yeah.
And
And so Satie has pretty much already, I think, in her mind, already found Simon Tarsus guilty.
Mhm.
Maybe, and she hasn't said that, but I think in her mind she has, right? She's like, oh, the Betazoid's telling me that he's probably the likely co-conspirator, so he's going to be guilty. But then what I love is when she and Picard, I think, go down to engineering, and LaForge and Data are like, actually, guys, there was no sabotage. What happened was we just got a bad part. You know,
Yeah.
that part that was made in a different part of the Alpha Quadrant by, not good people. So it was faulty and it's just not good. So it was put on at Earth Station McKinley during their refit, and it just happened to not. We got the Timu version of the part we needed. It's
Yeah.
not the good part,
Wasn't. Yeah.
and that's actually what caused the explosion. And so I love the look on her face because she's just like, oh. But then I think she thinks she's like, yeah, but I'm still not satisfied. Something's still not
Yeah.
adding up here.
Yeah.
This is where this witch hunt goes, like almost like a snowball starting to roll downhill. It's building up speed and momentum. It's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and she now becomes just adamant that Simon Tarses is the co-conspirator with Jadon.
Hmm. Something has to be pointed at as right the scapegoat.
Yeah.
Someone has to fall.
Yep.
In her mind. I
Yep.
think, and she speaks that during her breakdown with Picard, and she says, "I've brought down bigger men than you, Picard."
Mm,
So she's so focused on that. I think her pride is there. She's like, "I am going to find like someone, no matter what, and
yeah.
someone has to be it." She's so blinded.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. She was blinded. And I also think she's too reliant on Sabin.
Hmm.
Way too reliant on the Betazoid for, you know, being guilty. There's no admission of guilt by Simon Tarses. And then once she finds out that it was the admission form to the academy that he falsified, that still isn't good enough. She still thinks he's hiding something. So he falsified the information about his lineage on the form, stating that his paternal grandfather was Vulcan when in fact it's Romulan. And I think there's something to do with the Romulans that makes her snap. And she goes, "Well, he's part Romulan. His grandfather's Romulan, so that means that he's guilty."
Yeah,
This idea of guilty
yeah,
by association, right?
yeah,
Just like the witch the whatchamacallit, Salem witch trials back in the 1600s, right? It was,
yeah,
well, you associate with someone who we think is a witch, so therefore you're guilty and we're going to burn you at the stake. Guilt by association, which is not not a good way to lead an investigation like this. To
yeah,
simply, oh, his grandfather was on his father's side is was Romulan. So therefore, he's automatically guilty.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is you're guilty by just your ethnicity, right? So uh, with in our American history, like having the internment camps for the Japanese, like just okay, then all if if you had ethnicity from Japan, then you were placed in an internment camp, all
Yeah.
based on like fear, right? So in the circumstance here in the Federation, Romulans are an enemy. Um, there's really not good relationships with the Romulans right now. So if your ethnicity happens to be Romulan or part Romulan or somehow that is in your lineage, then that activates the fear response. And
Yeah.
so,
I,
yeah,
I found it interesting. So Picard assigns Riker to be Tarsus counsel, which I thought was also fascinating. Obviously at this particular juncture, since we haven't Pegasus hasn't happened yet, you know, Picard trusts Riker implicitly to make him the counsel for Simon Tarses. And I also find it interesting that Riker at some point before the scene that Simon Tarses is up on the I don't want to call it the stage, but up in the chair,
hmm
right, in front of everybody, that he basically, advises him to invoke the seventh
yeah,
guarantee of the Constitution of the United Federation of Planets and just not answer any further questions,
yeah,
right? To keep himself from any type of self-incrimination, things he might have said or whatever. There's a great line that Picard says in this when he says the road from legitimate suspicion to rampant paranoia can be shorter than we think.
yeah,
That's a great. I'm telling you what, Jerry Taylor wrote such an incredible episode. Her writing in this is absolutely phenomenal. Obviously, the speech Picard gives, and we'll talk about that in a little while, but like just even lines like that are just so great and they are so impactful and so applicable even in today's world.
yeah, absolutely is. Do you remember what year this episode premiered?
This was
No.
season 4, so this probably would have been what, 91?
Okay, 91.
Yeah, probably 1991. I'm glad you brought up the internment camps from World War II with the
Yeah,
Japanese because George Takei was in one of those as a
yeah,
young man, as a child, I think. So that's also another great example you brought up to back up kind of what's happening here. Not the exact same thing, but the idea, right? The guilt by association, the paranoia, all this kind of stuff. Like, well, he's half Romulan, so therefore, you know, he's guilty, right? He's half Romulan. He would have, of course, he would have helped the Klingon, during all of this. That doesn't. I mean, he's a Starfleet member. Why does that
hmm
mean that? You know
Why
what I
does it
mean?
mean it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jerry Taylor did wonderful. That and that line, can you read that line again?
Yeah,
Is
Picard
beautiful.
Picard says the road from legitimate suspicion to rampant paranoia can be shorter than we think.
Yeah, and we have lived this as a country, right, and a
Yes,
society.
many times
Yeah,
actually. Yeah.
yeah, multiple,
Yep.
yes, many times, and gone, uh, and you flip it like some suspicion to paranoia and fear, and the spreading of that across, and then more innocent people getting hurt because of the paranoia and fear is such a short fuse,
Yeah.
and it immediately goes there.
It really does. We see this in DS9 with the changelings as well. We'll
Yeah,
talk about that with Admiral Layton in Homefront and Paradise Lost, which is one of my absolute favorite two-part episodes in all of Star Trek. Uh, we'll see that and the paranoia and the suspicion and everything that goes on Earth and across the Federation with the changelings because they don't know someone could be a changeling, they wouldn't know it. Um, we see that, so we see this idea creep up even in the future. Even in the 24th century, we're seeing this creep up. And we know we've dealt with this, like you said, many times in our country's history here in the US.
this is it's so interesting that they use the metaphor of the chain and a link in the chain, right? And then at any time you have a link broken in this chain of relationships of people, it almost everything unwinds after that. And then
Yep.
because the, the ability for people to kind of relate to each other, there's so much fragility like in that, right? You might have a misunderstanding or a little thing go wrong or just the lineage of something in one person's past is something that another person doesn't like,
Hmm.
creates the opportunity for like not only good things, but creates the opportunity for like terrible things to come out of it when people aren't acting like with uh, or seeing things with clarity.
Yep. And not only that too, but I think the minute we stop talking, and this is a line from something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but the minute we stop talking,
Mhm.
we start building up hatred towards others,
Yeah.
and this civil discourse. The minute that becomes not a thing anymore, that's when it's really easy to hate others, right? And so, and I think maybe there's some of that here with Admiral Satie, right?
Yeah.
Has she had civil discord? Has she had an actual legit conversation with Simon Tarses? Has she sat down and got to know him like Picard does? Picard does this in
Hmm.
his quarters with Simon Tarses to get to know him more, and she doesn't. She just instantly goes to suspicion and accusation with nothing to go off of other than the intuition of her Betazoid. And so this is where I love what Picard does here. This is the leadership to me that I think is great. And Picard confronts Admiral retired Satie and says, you know, enough's enough. We need to put these hearings to rest, and so forth. Satie is not on board with that. And Picard's like, you know, I'll go over your head. I'll go directly to Starfleet Command if I have to. And she's like, yeah, well, I've been in contact with Starfleet Command since the very beginning, and they approve of what I'm doing. So, in fact, she even says that Admiral Thomas Henry of Starfleet Security is going to be coming on board to witness the next and all subsequent hearings until they figured out what's going on, right? And so, you know, she's basically saying, nope, the interrogations aren't going to be stopped. In fact, it's going to get bigger and bigger. And then she brings in like an audience for the second set of questioning with Simon Tarses. And I'm thinking to myself, I mean, this is really where you can see the witch hunt on her part, right? She's just full bore, like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to get him to admit his guilt no matter what it takes because he's the guy, even though I have no proof of that. And we're just going to keep going and keep drilling down and keep drilling down. And I'm going to get somebody
Hmm. Yeah,
come hell
she's
or
like
high
that.
water.
Yeah, absolutely. And her going to Starfleet and being in contact with Starfleet that whole time is like it is a slap like in the knife to the back of Picard
Yeah.
because earlier they had said we're partners, right? We're partners in that and we're going to be working together on this case. But she had not divulged to him that, oh, I've been like working with Starfleet Command the entire time.
Yeah.
And that part, Picard really begins to realize what kind of person like she is. Like,
Yeah. Her true
right?
colors are starting to show a little bit, right?
Yeah, her true colors are showing. She had made comments like, well, Picard had made inquiries about what Starfleet Command would like, and she had made like response comments like, well, that's for me to know, but not necessarily to divulge to you, right? Because I'm the one communicating with Starfleet Command. Captain Picard, I really like how he was in this episode. He was very
Mm.
thoughtful, right? He was not reactive, but was responsive. He was very calm, very thoughtful in his talks uh, with with Worf. I really like that scene where Worf is meeting with his own security people and saying, "I want you to investigate this, investigate that," and then Captain Picard comes in as Worf, a word, please. And he's very thoughtful in his conversation with Worf and thoughtful like throughout the entirety of the episode, I think. I liked how he was.
I agree. I think I know the answer to this, but just kind of explain what you mean. And I like you said this. Explain what you mean between responsive versus reactive
Yeah.
from Picard. Because I agree with you.
Yeah.
I really like the way Picard was in this episode, and I think this episode really shines on who Picard is as a person and as a captain.
Yeah. Because Picard, he was, when he observed these initial meetings and I guess trials with Tarsus, he was obviously like bothered, like at the moment, right? And he didn't react at the moment. Um, he went back and kind of was definitely reflecting on what was going on here and seeing everything, and then formulating in his mind, going, "Yeah, this isn't right," because he came from he was also concerned about what everything was, what was happening on the ship. He was disturbed by it. So he's taking all these inputs and thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And then when he was finally observing Satie and what she was doing, and then she was unveiling what kind of person she was, then he was going, "Oh, this is not right. Now I have to intervene. Um, now I have to put things to a stop." So I thought it was a very uh, uh, controlled, logical, and ethical and principle kind of approach that Picard took on how to do this, because he knew Satie is this enormous figure, right? So he's dealing with that too. And and he's having these conversations in private with Mr. Worf, in private with Satie. Can I have a word with you in private? Not doing it as a spectacle, like
Right.
as Satie is doing, trying to implore to them, to who they are, like as like rational human beings. So that's where I thought he was very like um, deliberate and response oriented and not reacting like in the moment. He deliberately chose the times that he wanted to talk to Worf and talk to Satie. So
Yeah, that
yeah,
is an absolutely fantastic point you made. Responsive, not reactive, and there's
yeah,
definitely a difference there. So that's great. To me, this episode is one of the episodes I think that encapsulates what you have mentioned many times on the podcast about Picard, about his leadership style, about the fact that he's always, doing the right thing, in his eyes, at least, right? And
yeah,
we'll see that in other episodes in our Spotlight series. Where he does what he thinks is the moral thing and the right thing. I love that he stands up to Satie and tells her, because they're in the ready room again talking about some of these things. And when she tells him, hey, the head of Starfleet Security is coming to the proceedings, so is it there's not enough pressure already on Picard and his crew for all of this? He says, what you're doing is unethical and immoral, and I'm
yeah,
and I'm going to fight you on it. And she's like, you do what you got to do. I'm going to do what I got to do.
yeah,
She's completely unfazed by anything he says. She looks at those as like vain, empty threats, right? Kind of things. But I like that Picard's telling her, look, I don't agree with what you're doing. It's unethical. It's immoral. I'm going to fight you on it. He's standing up for his principles. And like you said, he's always going to be that way. That is
yeah,
who he is. He is not going to, veer off the tracks from that. You've mentioned that many times when we've talked about Picard and the different captains. And I really think this episode is one of the episodes you could put kind of like in his job jar or his bucket
mhm,
of things that shows you what type of captain that he is and what kind of
yeah,
person he is.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Uh, you, you know what's like I find fascinating too is like this goes, it's not quite related to the episode, but um kind of gets to Picard a little bit. They ask him like, "Hey, have you recovered from your incident with the Borg?"
Hmm.
Right? Which was that's like that's a jab, right? That's like
Yeah.
a knife jab. Like
This is like what 20 ish episodes after the Borg, so it's
mhm.
not okay, well, I would say not even a year
Yeah. Not even
ish.
not even a year-ish. So
Yeah.
it it outlines some of the maybe duplicity in Starfleet Command, like high Starfleet Command, right? So they cleared Captain Picard to, he's obviously medically cleared to go back to command, to be back on the Enterprise to do his job, both physically and mentally cleared. Um, But then you've got these maybe doubters or skeptics or people that hold resentment or blame Picard, and that kind of sneaks its way in, and then Satie just happens to be the one that delivers that line, that questioning line, like to Picard, like, "Oh, have you recovered? How many people died from that incident?" That's just such a low thing to do.
It's a dig at him,
Yeah.
right? It's like she's trying to break down his character. Like she's like, "Oh, well you have some marks against your character, you know." So it's almost like she's trying to destroy or degrade his credibility,
Yes.
right? Because well, you were a
Yeah.
Borg, so and have you fully recovered from that?
Yeah.
As if that is affecting his judgment and his ability in this particular situation. Exact opposite. It's almost like Satie was with the Borg at some
Yeah.
point because of the way she is, right? And
Yeah.
if there was a moment in this episode where you'd have that famous, music, dun dun dun, it's the moment when Picard is he's walking somewhere, I think, and the other assistant to Satie, Nellen Tor, comes to him and says, "You're being summoned to
Yeah.
appear in front of the committee for questioning tomorrow at 0900." Like, y- y- you send your assistant to tell the captain of the ship, the captain of the flagship of the Federation, that you're being summoned for questioning.
I think I
Ooh,
I
that's
think he was, yeah,
salty as hell right
it
there,
was.
man. That's just,
I think he was on the bridge too, wasn't he? He was on the bridge and just
Uh,
sitting
oh,
down.
yeah, maybe it was in the bridge. You're right.
Yeah.
Maybe it was. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I and
Yeah.
I got a little bit, I thought there was a little humor in there that not actual humor in the scene, but humor that
Yeah.
I took, because they're on the bridge, right? And I'm thinking, does anyone see this guy, like the Satie's staff member, like walking on the bridge, walking over to the
Yep.
captain? Like, who let this guy on the bridge? Like, don't let him on the bridge. Like,
Right?
like
Yeah, that was crazy to me. But Act 5 is where we see everything, this last part of the episode is where you see everything explode,
hmm
right? And Captain Picard has his captain's log, and Admiral Henry, head of Starfleet security at the time, shows up to observe things. And in the interrogation, Picard has an opening statement, which is really good. And he's trying to get Satie to have some sort of reasoning
yeah,
and, get her to stop these hearings. But what is really nasty of her is that she then goes into questioning him about violating the Prime Directive 9 times since being given command of the Enterprise, uh, and about trying to go through each circumstance of the violations. Then the frickin' Betazoid brings up that this is when Picard delivered a supposed Vulcan ambassador to Pell to the Romulan neutral zone, and it turned out she was actually a Romulan spy.
yeah.
And the fact that Picard was so willing to let T'Pel go, despite the fact that she knew all this information. Now, imagine if this episode had happened after Picard had let Hugh go. Then that'd be another thing that they'd be knocking him for, right? I mean, yeah, this to me. So this is where this is like the peak of the witch hunt, right? Because now what you're doing is instead of trying to figure out who the potential co-conspirator with Jadon is, you're literally taking the captain in front of everybody. You're degrading him. You are basically metaphorically cutting him off at the knees for
hmm
his character, and you are attempting to destroy his credibility in front of
hmm
everybody in
hmm
order to make a point. And I think that this is so absolutely wrong and completely off the rails for Admiral Satie.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Um, and but it's
Oh,
also
one
kind of,
more thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's not even borderline, it's highly inappropriate.
yeah, highly inappropriate. Yeah, no, that's great. Those are great comments on that. And you wish you could say that this was just something that happens in fiction, but it happens in reality too. Like these these types of questioning, right? So um, these this part is key because Worf, coming back to Worf a little bit, Worf kind of sees what's going on a little bit.
Hmm.
Something clicks in Worf going, oh, this isn't right. Like, no, Captain, because Worf was there when Captain Picard had to endure all, Worf was there when the Romulan spy trade was happening, and Worf jumps to the defense of his captain. So he has a turning point there, going, "Oh, no, this isn't right. Captain Picard is not a bad person. I was there. I've been able to see like Captain Picard in these different circumstances." So
Yeah.
I think that was like uh, a turn. Well, it was definitely a turning point for Worf.
Agreed. And this scene where Satie is continuing to try to dig at Picard. He decides, you know what? I'm going to give you a little taste of your own medicine. I'm going to quote your father. And he starts the famous quote. I don't know if you want me to read it or not, but I think it's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
And that is when he says, something he was taught when he was a little boy, which is going back to the teachings of her father.
Hmm.
With the first link, the chain is forged, the first speech censored, the first thought forbidden, the first freedom denied, chains us all irrevocably. Those words were uttered by, oh, there it is, by Judge Aaron Satie as wisdom and warning. The first time any man's freedom is trodden on, we are all damaged. I fear that today. And then she freaks out and she's like, how dare you mention my father's name? And this is where we kind of like we talked about earlier, where this triggers, I hate that word, but this triggers something inside of her where something that's we don't really know about, something that's going on in her or whatever. And she jumps up from her chair and she starts accusing Picard of treason and conspiring with the Romulans, like just completely outlandish accusations. And that, you know, men like him in the Federation are the threat, and it's her job to seek him out and destroy him. And then, like you said, the famous line she says where she's like, I brought down bigger men than you. And that's when Admiral Henry, you could see in his face, he's just like, he can't believe what he's seen, this complete utter explosion. And then he gets up and he leaves the room, just like doesn't say a word, just gets up and leaves. This is where Admiral Satie ruins herself and brings herself down.
Yeah. I really think it was great that Admiral Henry doesn't say anything throughout the
Yes,
episode.
because that's telling, right? I mean, obviously he's a character in it. We know he's there, but the fact he just gets up and leaves and doesn't say anything was perfect the way they did that. Because that tells you everything you need to know. The head of Starfleet security just gets up and walks out, which means he's seen everything he doesn't need to see any more. This is literally turned into a complete circus.
Hmm. Her explosion in that moment, it's like she's consumed by this like identity that she's a righteous person, you know, looking to save the Federation and seek out, hunt, and destroy like conspirators.
Yeah.
So she's her as a person and her identity as a person is like fascinating. She's obviously like very prideful person. Um, she obviously loves her father.
Mhm.
Um, but she's lived in that shadow like for a long time, and she is under this great deal of pressure. Um, and that kind of consumes her on this fire of like righteousness, right? and and then she's looking for conspirators or seeing conspiracy like all around her because she's a Satie. Of course, she's going to be able to seek out and find conspirators. Um,
Yeah, name recognition, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like she has built up. this thing in her mind about her and her family name,
Hmm.
and the fact that because she is a Satie, that it's up to her, right? Like it's only she could do this. Like nobody else could do this. It's up to her to save the Federation from the evil Captain Picard and
Yeah.
all of his conspirators and so forth. And so what I love is that, her father's words are put back on her by Picard, and I love that he did that because not only is it true, not only were the words so important and so meaningful in that moment, but now it's turned it back on her, and it has to have she would have had to have come to this realization of some level of fantasy in her mind and the paranoia that she was, wheeling around in front of everybody. It's not like, I mean, she's the one that made this an open proceeding, right? I think she had mentions why she did it as an open proceeding because it tended to did it I think it was so that it wouldn't sow distrust amongst the crew
Mhm.
because all these quiet proceed. Like I do think she meant well by making it an open proceeding to keep the rumors and all that stuff from happening. But it's like she did that to prevent that. But then herself she was consumed by those same rumors and paranoia that she was trying to prevent.
Yeah.
And maybe she didn't even realize it until that moment when she sits down by herself. Everybody's left and she's just there in the chair, realizing what's just happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of like quelching fear and paranoia, it had the opposite effect of like maybe spreading more fear, spreading more
Yes.
paranoia,
Yeah.
spreading more spectacle.
Yeah. And it's very, and I don't remember if a character says this, but it's very apparent that her credibility has to be shot, right? And I can't imagine that anybody would actually believe her or trust her again. I mean,
Hmm.
she's literally back into retirement she goes, but I don't think she's coming back out of it this time.
Hmm. Exactly. She's gonna stay in retirement now.
Yeah.
She makes it a point earlier in the episode with Picard where she's telling him a little bit about her life, like saying like most of her life she's been living on starships or on shuttlecraft, traveling back and forth with no friends. She makes that a point too. I have no friends.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah.
You know? So in a way, she doesn't work with partners. She made a point to tell that to Picard. She's a little bit of a just in her own world as an isolated individual living years like on her own. And maybe she has her staffers with her. I'm not sure,
Oh, she's a
but
careerist, right? I mean, that's
careerist,
it.
yeah,
Her whole life is consumed by this career that she had. Maybe that's part of the reason why she makes Admiral.
yeah. But that uh, will have the effect of maybe distorting what is real, not having like a peer-to-peer friendly interaction with other people to get other perspectives to continue learning, um, would certainly have this effect on her, like as an individual, right? She'll form this picture of her in this mind. I'm this individual that rooted out conspiracy from Starfleet. That's me. Um, but then she's by herself all the time. It's got to have like some sort of like effect.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's almost kind of like she's created this world that she lives in, and there's nobody there to check her, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is no check. There's no sanity check. There's no person saying, whispering in her ear about something. There's no keeping her on the right and narrow. There's nobody there to be the guardrails for her.
Yeah.
She's on her own, and that is very self-inflicted.
Yeah.
That's this just kind of what she's chosen along the way. And so I think I'm glad you mentioned that. Not that I'd forgotten, but I'm glad you brought that up because I think that's also an important aspect to as we learned about this character as part of spotlighting her in this episode.
Yeah. I mean, she's very like at the beginning, she's very likable and she's very
Yeah.
intelligent, right?
And I think
And
her intentions are
yeah.
good too, right? In the
Mm-hmm.
beginning. I
Yeah.
really do.
Yeah. you're right. Her intentions are noble. So it, she sets up like very well. It's this great case study of watching like the almost the downfall like of an individual and the circumstances like that they lived in and kind of their own picture of the world and the picture of their self picture of who they are as an individual um, helped kind of destroy them at the end. I don't feel like to talk about how she compares to Pressman. I don't feel that she's like a narcissist like
Mm-mm.
Pressman was. She's it's a very, very different kind of individual there.
Well, maybe in the end a little bit. When
Okay.
she says
Yeah.
I've brought down
Yeah.
bigger men than you, to me that's a narcissist type of a thing.
Yeah.
But I don't think as a whole she is, right? I think she
Yeah.
has a moment where that kind of comes out, and maybe that means she is, but she doesn't come across that way for the first part of the episode by any
Mm-hmm.
means.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
know, I think she has good intentions and she's there and legitimately is there as a partner to work with Picard to try to figure this out. But then she becomes consumed with hate and paranoia and, all of these things that, is something Picard would despise, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You almost wish that she she could see herself more objectively. I think if she could see detach and like saw what she was doing, then she'd pull back and go, "Oh, I've I've way come off the guardrails." I feel like there's a part of her that would go, "Hey, I'm doing something wrong. I need to restrain," right? If she could see herself uh, separate from her body.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up the point about her and her lifestyle. Her whole, the way she's
Yeah.
lived, she has no home. She's gone from starship to starbase to whatever. And the fact she has no friends, I mean that's in there for a reason, right? I
Yeah.
mean that's setting up who she is and the life she's lived. And so I think that's a great point that you make. Like if she had had that kind of that person, to kind of be her what's the word I'm looking for? Like her accountability partner almost to kind of
Yeah.
keep her accountable. That maybe she never would have gone off the guardrails in this episode because she
Mm-hmm.
would have had a little bit. I think she would have had more self awareness. I think that's what she's lacking as a character. She lacks self awareness because she's by herself all the time. She has no friends. Her work is everything. Her career's been everything. And now she's come out of retirement. She's right back in the same thing. You'd even think like in retirement, maybe she'd have some friends. She'd kind of maybe things would start to change, but she's never changed her ways. No
Yeah.
family, no kids, no friends, nothing but her career. And so I think maybe that's to me, now that I think about it, the biggest thing is that she lacks any sort of self awareness. And you're right. If she had self awareness, maybe that would have allowed her to kind of pull herself back and say, I've gotten too far.
Yeah. Yeah. Self-awareness is perfect way to put it. And then her being by herself and her isolation, she lost the connection with humanity a little bit,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
because she lost that connection with humanity and maybe what it means to be like a part of a social unit,
Yeah.
part of humans, right? Then she lost that ability to make that connection. She lost that ability to see um, paranoia or fear or see the consequences of like what she was doing in
Yeah.
others.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Um, okay.
Hmm.
So we look at this episode and we see someone who I think we can both agree, Chris, is quite a bit different than Pressman. Right? I mean, Pressman was literally willing to sacrifice lives because of his ego of trying to do this, make this thing, make this technology so they could get the upper hand on the Romulans.
Hmm.
There is some comparison there, though, right? They
Hmm.
both have they're both anti-Romulan, which I can understand why. I mean, the,
Yeah.
the Romulans and the
Yeah.
Federation have never been real good buddies. Although we do see the Romulans come into the war during the Dominion War because Cisco lies and cheats and does all this stuff, and that whole thing from In the Pale Moonlight. Uh, but so there I guess there is some overlap there, but these two characters are very different. And not that Pressman is the guy we're going to compare everybody to, but that's just the last episode that we did, right? In our
Yeah.
Spotlight series was the Pegasus episode with Admiral Pressman. Just give me real quickly, give us your overall thoughts of, Admiral Satie, kind of put the bow on it, and, tell me what you think of her as a character.
Yeah, I think Admiral Satie is a great example of what can happen to any one of us when we're put in these positions, right? So she is charged uh, with the job and the position of like essentially you're an investigator. There's a problem, you will root out and you will find this cause. And then like throughout history, when you've had like these types of positions, whether it be like an inquisitor in the Spanish Inquisition, or you're charged to root out so-called evil with as a witch hunter, right? Then you are looked upon by the current society as someone that like, okay, you're gonna root out the evil, you're gonna root out the problem, you're going to be our savior to help solve this and then deliver us into like either a peaceful circumstance or fix all the problems on our ship or fix and root out all of the evil in the Federation. So I think all of that she'll have in the back of her mind because she's a very, very intelligent like person. And then that is slowly going to build up into like enormous, enormous pressure. Couple that with who her father is, so that when she comes into this position, all of those things are going and her isolation as an individual, all of those things are going to set her up in into unfortunately like failure, this circumstance of failure and self like implosion. I've got all of this pressure upon me. I've got this self identity of me supposedly being a savior and an inquisitor and trying to save the Federation. She can't do that. And no one can do that as an individual, right? You are going to implode. And then at the end, she is so emotional and is just when Picard reflects back and he's a reflection of her father in that moment. Like, so when I think about this, like she's got her father in such high regard, and when she sees Picard at that moment reading the words of her father, she is seeing her father, and then she goes, "Oh, I've lost the way," and then she explodes and implodes right there.
Yeah.
So, um, that's it's tragic, like in a way, right? So her father has imparted all this wisdom upon her to that he wants her to share with the world. She takes the wisdom. She's so intelligent. Yes, she does great things, but then she's alone so much of her life. And then when she sees her father in Picard at the end, it just destroys her. So,
Mm,
yeah, that's some of my thoughts on Satie as a tragic figure.
yeah.
Yeah, you, my friend.
Um,
Ah,
I I don't know if you look at her like this. I kind of look
yeah.
at her a little bit like a Shakespearean character,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because in Shakespeare, we see many a great characters that fall. Um, some of them, meet their demise because of their own doings. And so I think that overall, I think Satie's heart is in the right place as far as wanting to do the right thing. But she is overcome with emotion. She's overcome with paranoia, with fear. And like I think you put perfectly, she's overcome with this massive weight upon her from the weight uh of her father and his reputation and him being so well known, and also the weight of what she's being asked to do. I don't think she's come out of retirement. She doesn't want to fail, right? She's been
Yeah.
asked by Starfleet headquarters to go do a thing, and she wants to do the thing. She want to come back and go, well, I just couldn't figure it out, couldn't find it.
Yeah.
That doesn't look good for someone who, a few years earlier was such an integral part of ensuring that that event didn't happen. So, I think that she, I yeah, like I said, I think her heart's in the right place
Yeah.
in the beginning.
Yeah.
In the end, it's not, right? It's all about the gotcha. She was looking for a gotcha. She wanted to find that person. And she, I think, violated her well, she certainly violated Picard's morals and ethics because he came right out and said what you're doing is immoral and unethical. And I think she, like, just like you said, I think she shows us as an audience how easily it can be to slip into that type of mindset.
Yeah.
Because we're all human, right? And she's a human too. She's flawed just like we are. So it can be real easy to fall into that trap. And I think we have to maintain a certain level of vigilance. We have to have a significant level of self-awareness and discernment to be
Yeah.
able to see these types of things coming and go, whoa, whoa, I got to pull myself back. But also, I think she's a case study for, listen, isolating yourself throughout your life and having no friends, no family, nothing can put you in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she operated in a vacuum. And she
Mm-hmm.
did, like we talked about, she didn't have those guardrails. So I think it's important to have friends and people around you that can be that guardrail and say, hey, man, you know, you're kind of going off track here. You're about to go off the ledge here a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Like you're bumping up against them guardrails. I think we need to I'm gonna help reel you back in and get you away from that place you don't want to be and that place I don't want you to be.
Yeah.
Right. So that level of accountability. And I think if she had friends and people along the way, instead of being so isolated, she might have been different and may have never had this incident happen.
Yeah.
Right. So I think she's a little bit of a tragic Shakespearean character, to be
Yeah.
completely honest with you, because I think she shows just how quickly things can change, right? And how quickly, uh, you know, good ideas and so forth can go, to being in a bad place.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think beautifully put. And I think we were talking about this as a feel of a play before.
yeah,
Um, and yes, and certainly this feels like she is a Shakespearean character.
yeah, and that's how it feels
Yeah.
to me for sure. Um, but you know, so this is another example with Admiral retired Norah Satie of, is she one of Starfleet's finest? That's the question. We are going to see some captains and admirals who I would say fit the bill of being Starfleet's finest. And then we're going to see examples where maybe you think she was one of those, right? And maybe for pretty much all of her career, she probably was
Yes.
considered one of Starfleet's finest. But then she had this moment and she fell flat on her face.
Yeah.
And I think that's where she went from one of Starfleet's finest to not one of Starfleet's finest, right? We know Pressman's definitely not, right? We definitely know that. Admiral, Commodore Decker from TOS, another example where I think was a great officer and a great guy, and then just kind of started making decisions because he was up against a wall, and he had this massive weight of guilt for the loss of his crew and everything that was really outside of his control because they didn't know this, the power of this doomsday machine. They didn't realize what was going to happen and so forth. But you can just see how some of these characters can go from being, we would consider one of the finest, to not, or they're just not, period. I don't think Pressman probably ever will be considered. Maybe at any point in his career, Starfleet's finest. But we are going to see examples of that. And then, we talked about this earlier, Chris. We're going to see examples in these episodes where captains and admirals are in situations where it's clear and obvious to us as an audience. It's very black and white, right? What's right and what's wrong. And then we're going to see other situations like in DS9, like with the Cisco's good buddy, Captain Calvin Hudson, where as an audience we go, okay, maybe it's not black and white in the situation. Maybe there's some shades of gray here. Maybe I understand why he's doing what he's doing, even though he's not maybe doing it the right way.
Hmm.
I kind of understand why he's doing what he's doing and why he's getting behind and you know, looking after the Maquis and so forth. But and same thing with Admiral Layton as well, and why you think he's doing what he's doing. So we're gonna get a little bit of all of that, and Captain Jellicoe will be another
Yeah,
great example, right? I mean, I'm super excited to talk about Captain Jellicoe because there's a lot to unpack in that two-parter Chain of Command Part 1 and 2.
absolutely there is. Yeah, I think we're like the defenders of Captain Jellicoe, you and I.
I
Poor
mean, he's not
guy.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, he came across as a little bit of a hard ass,
Yeah.
right? But you also know that like maybe Picard kind of let things get a little easy for his crew there after all the years of being underneath him. But I look forward to that. I think that Admiral Satie, Admiral Pressman, Commodore Stone, Commodore Decker, they've each taught us something a little bit different, right? And they've each shown a light on both the finest and not the finest in Starfleet for us to talk about and dissect.
Yeah. And how, you know, uh, in Starfleet, like I think Admiral Satie was one of Starfleet's finest until she
Agreed.
fell, right?
Yeah,
And and like as an organization, as Starfleet, it's almost like impossible to see uh, this with people, right? So because you take Satie, Starfleet wanted to Satie help in the situation. Who would have known it would have happened this way? Like who'd have known like she had this in her that would make her like implode? But but
yeah.
but she did.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. I agree wholeheartedly. And we've got so besides some of the characters we've already talked about in this Spotlight series with Captain Maxwell, Captain Jellicoe, Captain Hudson, these kinds of characters, Admiral Lacheyev. There's some other less talked about admirals and captains that we're going to talk about. Guys like
Mhm.
Admiral Mark Jameson with Too Short a Season, which is going to be wonderful. The Offspring with Vice Admiral Haftel. Some characters that not a lot of people talk about. The Dias Cast with Admiral Todman. Um, Captain Ransom and Equinox and Voyager. Oh
Yeah.
boy, that's going to be a doozy.
Yeah.
That is good. That the morality in that is going to be
Yeah.
a real doozy, right? I
Yeah.
mean, killing aliens out of a different dimension to fuel your ship, and I mean, and the run in with Voyager. Yeah, it's going to be a doozy.
Yep.
So but there's a lot of that to talk about and more. And looking forward, my friend, to continuing the Spotlight series with you. As we get inch our way closer to February, we're going to be working on some amazing guests
Mhm.
that we have been trying to schedule for months and months and months. It just scheduling wise hasn't worked out, but I do have assurances from both the guests that they are absolutely still going to come on and share their careers with you. It's just a matter of getting that final nail into the date
Yeah.
that we can have them on and share some time with them and learn more about their lives and their career. So looking forward to that as well. So on the next episode of the Random Redshirt podcast, we will be diving into an episode called The Wounded in TNG, where we talk about said captain, Captain Benjamin Maxwell, and the relationship with him and O'Brien and his I would say prejudice towards Cardassians. So it's going to be a great episode.
Yeah, it will be excellent. Yeah, and we'll be able to kind of contrast O'Brien and Riker in some different like circumstances, right? So they're past commanders, which
Yeah.
will be outstanding.
Yeah, that'll be a lot of fun. We look forward to that. Look forward to this as always, my friend. This was great. Had a great time. And we hope all of you watching and listening all over the globe and the interwebs has had a great time with us as well. Again, be sure to go on Facebook, Instagram, Threads. There's a video version of this episode and many others on YouTube if you're listening to us on the audio side on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching us on YouTube, we have actually quite a few episodes that were done before we started doing YouTube videos in an audio only format. And again, you can find that anywhere you get your podcast. So be sure to go check all that out and more. And we look forward to bringing you our next episode with TNG's The Wounded as we highlight Captain Ben Maxwell and all of his awesomeness, I think, maybe, or prejudice, or and everything in between. We look forward to that. So, anyways, thanks everybody as always. Take care, and we'll catch you next time right here on the Random Redshirt Podcast.